الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد عليه أفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Inshallah, for today we will be discussing a very important topic, a topic that everyone should keep in mind at all times. Being conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and feeling His greatness and fearing Him are some of the most important and mandatory things that we need to do in our daily lives. Not just for moments, not just for specific days or specific months, but throughout our lives. And they are so important that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us and warns us for not being conscious of Him. قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم واعلموا أن الله يعلم ما في أنفسكم فاحذروه. And know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what's within you, so beware of Him. Not just that, but the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam also encourages us to be conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at all times. As he says, فعن أبي ذر الغفاري رضي الله عنه قال قال لي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم اتق الله حيثما كنت وأتبع السيئة الحسنة تمحها وخالق الناس بخلق حسن. Be conscious of Allah at all times, wherever you are. And right after you commit a sin, follow it with a good deed so we can erase it and treat people with good character. Being conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in any situation, wherever you are, no matter what the place is or the time, remembering that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is constantly aware of every action that you do. Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhu was on a trip with his friends, or on a journey, and he saw a shepherd, so he wanted to test him, to see how he is. He goes to the shepherd and tells him, sell me one of these sheep, I will pay you for them. The shepherd responds with what? Oh, these are not mine, these are my master's, I can't just sell them to you. So Abdullah ibn Umar responds with, it's okay, just tell him the wolf ate it and I'll pay you for it. Don't even worry about it. Your master's nowhere to be found. So he responds with, فَأَيْنَ اللَّهِ? Where is Allah? Those words made Abdullah ibn Umar very emotional. And he kept repeating, فَأَيْنَ اللَّهِ? فَأَيْنَ اللَّهِ? And if we think to ourselves, at every moment that we are about to commit any action, أين Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Where is Allah at this moment? And we know that no matter where we are, no matter what we do, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always watching us. And we think for a moment, what stopped this shepherd or this servant from selling the sheep? It's because he was very conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even though his master was not there, even though he was going to get money to do that, he remembers that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always there. And after that, Abdullah ibn Umar went to the master, bought the servant and sold him for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in reward for his consciousness of Allah. Being conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala becomes true by believing without a shred of doubt that no matter what, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there. And He tells us, يَعْلَمُ خَائِنَةَ الْأَعْيُنِ وَمَا تُخْفِي الصُّدُورِ. He knows everything, even the things that you're hiding within yourself, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala already knows about that. And if you are wondering, how much does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala know? How much does He truly know? Does He just see our actions? No. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows much more than that. As He says, قال الله تعالى وَلَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ وَنَعْلَمُ مَا تُوَسْوِسُ بِهِ نَفْسُهُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows the thoughts, your subconscious that you don't even know about. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what it's thinking. وَنَحْنُ أَقْرَبُ إِلَيْهِ مِنْ حَبْلِ الْوَرِيدِ. We are closer to you than your jugular vein. That's how close Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to us. So, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is this close to us, every action we commit, whether it's a good deed or a bad deed, you need to remember and know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching it. So whether you have no shame in what you do, remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees. So what are the important things? Why should we be conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? One, it gives the Muslim sincerity, and his obedience is accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Two, the person is loved not just by the people here, but the people in the heavens as well, by the malaika and by the greatest Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you are conscious of Him, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves you. And finally, gaining the good in this dunya and the akhirah. Gaining all the hasanat, gaining the thanks from the people, gaining the rewards here, but most importantly, gaining the most important reward, which is Jannah. So if you decided to be conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you want to know, what are the benefits? What do I gain? The human love to gain things. We worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because we are told to worship Him, and so we can get the reward, which is Jannah. So for first, one of the benefits is entering Jannah, which is what everyone wants. For two, the Muslim gains the satisfaction of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Three, it helps him abandon sins and evil deeds. And four, it is a reason for your dua to be accepted. So all these benefits are connected. If I am conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I know that He's watching me, I'll stay away from bad deeds. If I stay away from bad deeds, I will start doing good deeds. If I start doing good deeds, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be satisfied with me. And if He is satisfied with me, I will be rewarded with Jannah. Allahumma ja'alna min ahli al-Jannah. Now, you've been convinced, hopefully, that being conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is very, very important. So, what are the things that will help me be conscious of Allah? What are some strategies? What are some tips that I can do so that I can be conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? For one, knowledge. Having knowledge. If you don't have the knowledge, if you don't do the research, if you don't learn, how will you even know this idea of being conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Secondly, it is doing excessive worship. It's not enough that you know without implementing what you know. So therefore, making those worships to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or worshiping Allah, is a way that will help you be more conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Thirdly, surrounding ourselves with good people, with good friends. When you're surrounded with a bad group, they start pulling you away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whether it's intentionally or not, it happens. So therefore, we need to make sure we are with friends that pull us, that remind us of salah, that see us when we do bad things, they call us out on it. They make sure that we are conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at all times. Those are the people that we need to surround ourselves with. Number four is remembering the akhirah. We need to remember that this dunya is temporary. We will not last here forever. The main objective is the hereafter, the akhirah. Whether I'm going to Jannah, that's what I'm looking forward to, or me wanting to stay away from Jahannam, wal-'iyadhu billah. And finally, knowing and believing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is aware. He is aware of everything we do, no matter what it is, in any situation, in any place we are. If you want to do anything, remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching you. If you are hiding, if you are in a place where no one can see, Yunus alayhi salam was inside of a whale in the deeps of the sea, and he still was conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and asked Him for help. And that's how we all need to be. And we need to focus not just on staying away from the bad, but also doing the good. Staying away from the bad is the first step, but making sure that we are always doing good, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching us. Everything is written down. We all have a raqib and atid that write everything we do. And because of that, we need to always be conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helps us in this dunya to be conscious of Him so that we can get the award and the reward of the akhirah in the Jannah. Allahumma ameen. جزاكم الله خير على حسن الاستماع وأسأل من الله سبحانه وتعالى أن ينفعكم جميعا بما سمعتموه اليوم وجزاكم الله خير والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.